Welcome to Semper Fi. I'm your host, Mark Bonstein, or as I was commonly referred to as Staff Sergeant B. We'll get to my guest in a second, but first off, we'll do what happened at this date and time in history. On May 12th, in the Navy in 1943, Admiral Amsworth leads 4 cruisers and 7 destroyers in 2 groups to shell Villa and Munda American ships laid more landmines near the New Georgia Islands. And in the Air Force in 1944, about 800 bombers of the U.S. 8th Air Force with a substation fighter escort attacked an oil plant at Luna Mishberg. And in the Army in 1944, Allies attacked by forces of the U.S. 5th Army make some progress against the German-held defense. And last but least, the Marines in 1945. On the island of Okinawa, Japanese forces repel attacks by the elements of the U.S. 3rd Amphibious Corps by the 1st Marine Division that suffers a heavy loss. And one quick note, green flag exercise at Nellis is going to be here from the 13th to the 27th, so that will be tomorrow. And this is conducted by the 549th Combat Training Squadron at Nellis and 12th Combat Training Squadron at Fort Irwin. And units from the Air Force, Navy, Air Force, and the Marine Corps and allied nations regularly participate in Green Flag, which is held throughout the year. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my next guest, who came into the Army in 1968. So welcome, Arthur Lucero.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, give us a little,
Well,
where are you from, down and dirty? Let's start from the beginning.
I was raised in Torrance in Los Angeles, and I graduated in 67 and ended up getting drafted, of course, in 68 and did my basic and my AIT in Fort Ord out by Monterey in California. And it was pretty rough, you know, when you were never used to being in that position and then being in that big of a hurry. I mean, 8 weeks really goes fast when you have to take in, I mean, to learn how to survive in the jungle, how to survive and read maps and something you never read, to call in an airstrike, to call in whatever you need to do to survive, you know, and use weapons that you've never used, you know, because, I mean, when you think about using a machine gun, you never thought, you know, you'd ever be touching anything like that, you know, as you're growing up.
So when you were going through boot camp, they actually had time in for you to teach you some kind of jungle training?
No, not right down to the actual jungle training.
Okay.
You know, we went into a little bit more of that in AIT.
Okay, where was AIT?
That was Advanced Infantry Training.
Okay.
In Fort Ord.
Okay, so they had more of the jungle environment.
Well, to an extent, yeah, because we also did some night maneuvers there to get us, you know, to understand what the point and factor was about being out in the dark and going about being extra careful, you know, with the starlight scopes and always being on guard. And that was one of the factors that was really rough in Vietnam, is that the guard duty at night was really bad, because a lot of guys, if they would fall asleep, that would mean disaster, you know, for the platoon or the squad that you were in, you know, in whatever position you were at in a area of the rice paddies, or even in the jungles. Of course, in the jungles it was even worse, because Charlie could sneak up easier on you, you know, and that was disastrous right there, you know. But when I first went to Vietnam, I actually started out on the Riverines. It was a detachment with the 3rd of the 39th, and we were patrolling up and down the river to just keep an eye out for maybe big groups of Viet Cong coming down. Well, NVA actually they were called. NVA was the North Vietnam Army. They would come down from the north, and that's what we were patrolling, to see if we would see big groups of them. And at the time we were just getting shot at all the time, you know, by snipers up all over the place, and it was just like being out as a sitting duck. I mean, you know, actually going kind of fast, but still the bullets would fly from everywhere. So eventually they abandoned that unit because we had too many heavy losses, which that occurred every day. You know, when I first went in there, I mean, I was one out of 4 guys, and I was the only one that survived out of those 4 guys just in a few days. I mean, in one day we lost 2 guys just in one swipe, down the river. And on the way back we lost another one, and it would happen like that all the time where we would lose guys, left and right.
Didn't sound like the life expectancy on
Well,
those.
it wasn't.
What they call those boats? PBR boats or
They were I just call them patrol boats,
patrol boats? Yeah.
Yeah.
Life expectancy didn't sound very high on them.
No, that's why they abandoned that unit. They really did. They said, no, we were losing too many people on those boats, and
Back at that time, about estimated how many of those boats you figured were in the area? Because I know when you look at a lot of those movies.
we only had 2.
Oh, was that it?
One was going and one was coming.
Only had 2 the whole time. There wasn't
As far as
fleet.
far as I seen,
Really?
yeah. And
Okay.
and being as that it was just an elite unit, that was just a little unit, and they were on the river. Instead of just saying that we were patrolmen on the river, we would call us riverines, because we would actually pick up different platoons and take them out and drop them in different areas on the outskirts of villages to patrol those villages for NVA coming down, and to keep the actual North Vietnam Army from taking a lot of the young men from the villages, which they did all the time. They would actually steal them right out of the mothers, the mamasans they call them, right out of their hands, and told them straight out, if you say anything, your family's dead. And that's what, I mean, me not knowing the exact words and everything, which my sergeant knew a lot more than I did, and so did some of the other guys that were there a lot longer than I was, when I first went into country.
Right.
Started finding out about that. So when they put me with the 9th Division, and I was with the infantry, we were doing a lot of that. We were visiting different villages, patrolling and visiting, and just being on guard at all times in different points in the villages, just making sure that the NVA wouldn't come down, and then we would also look for different weapons that they would store for themselves to come down and actually pick them back up and go after us whenever they would be chasing us down, or something, or set a booby trap for us, or just try to ambush a good group of us at one time, because later on, when I spend some more time in the in the jungles, just running from north to south all over. Excuse me. It was really rough, I mean, there was so many guys that were hurt really bad all the time with booby traps and sniper fire, and we would be taking that every day. There was just no stop. And then when the rain started coming, I was there also when the monsoon season hit. I was only out there for close to 6 months, and 6 months was like a lifetime out there.
So you went over the country. Was it a 6-month tour or a year?
Year.
It was a whole year you had to stay there.
Whole year, and I didn't make it. I ended up, after doing 30 days on a dredging ship, I went back out in the jungles again. And by the way, dredging ship is just a ship that they have out in the river that is actually pulling ground, earth you might call it, from the bottom of the rivers. I don't think a lot of people ever even heard of a dredging ship. But we were stationed on that for 30 days, guarding it from booby traps floating down the river towards it, and trying to blow it up, because the NVA tried to blow it up several times. In one particular night, they came down in a great big force. They called it almost in a brigade force to try to put the whole ship out of commission. And I just happened to be in the worst position that I could ever think of. And you couldn't imagine that I was on the ammo dump, of course. That was really crazy. I mean, that was just a nightmare.
So being on this dredging ship, you say it pulls the soil from the bottom of the. Did you take pot shots, by the way?
Oh, they were constantly doing that all the time.
Even just on that ship, you still got pot shots at it.
Oh, of course, yeah, from both sides of the river.
Okay, so you were saying that it pulls the soil out of the bottom of the river. And what were you using it for?
And they push it straight out through these great big tubings, piping you might call it, straight out into different sections, farther out, for positioning kitchen units for a hot meal for the troops that are out in country, that have been out for a week or so without any hot food and just living on nothing but the rations, and whatnot, and whatever we could get from Mama San, and buy some of the rice with maybe some meat or something in it, and have a hot meal with her once in a while. If Mama San would present herself to us and want to sell us some of her food, and that was sometimes very well welcomed, eating a hot meal when you've been out in the country for, a week or two at a time and not having anything hot and just living off the dirty water and whatever rations you had left, and not knowing when your rations would come off out of the air or go to a certain position where we'd have some waiting for us. And in these areas that I'm talking about, that the actual soil would be put down and compressed so that we could meet in these areas to these kitchens or landing zones for the choppers,
right,
to pick up some of our wounded. That's what a lot of that soil was used for.
Oh, for making quick landing pads?
Yeah.
Well, that was good.
Right. And I know a lot of people never even heard of those, but yeah, we were hit pretty bad one night, and our whole houseboat, which housed the whole platoon and then some, all the workers and whatnot, we almost lost it. And the ship took some bad hits, but it survived. And then shortly after that, I was back out in country again, because we only did a 30-day stretch, which was supposed to be an easy stretch. They claimed that it was like an R&R, so to speak. Rest and relaxation, they called it, Yeah, right.
What rest and relaxation, right?
With the Charlies firing at us daily, every day, you never knew when a bullet was going to hit somebody, if not one of the workers, one of the guys in their positions on the different boat, different parts of the boat. Because we had like a 60 machine gun on one end and another 60 machine gun on the other end, and then some of our 79 grenade launchers in the middle, because we had like 3 positions on all the way around the ship. And then we had another position on the houseboat itself to combat anything from the other side of the river that was coming in, as far as maybe rocketing or mortars coming in to try to put even the houseboat out of commission. Because without the houseboat, well, they couldn't keep the workers close enough to keep them on duty there on the ship. But that was just one of the 30-day stretches that I did that was kind of deadly, you might call it, in that time. But back to the jungles, it was rough, really rough.
And on that note, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back, and you can tell us. And I think you said you were there for the Tet Offensive.
Right, I sure was, and I was also a tunnel rat, you might call it.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break, get a cup of coffee, come back and join us, and we're going to hear a little bit more what he had to do in country. Be right back.
Right on.
All right, we're back.
All right.
Thank you. Talking to my guest, Arthur. He was drafted in 1968 in the Army, and he was talking about where he was stationed. And we just got done talking about some of your jungle experiences.
Right.
So you made a comment that they use some of the dogs for sniffing. What was the most prescribed dog out there? Shepherd? Or I see a lot of movies they use Dobermans.
Well,
it didn't matter.
In my occasion out there, I never seen a Doberman. Mostly German Shepherds.
It was still Shepherds. Okay.
Yeah, they had them out there sniffing out booby traps. They were in some of the areas that in the path zone that we were headed the next day, and we would have the dog out in front of us, just sniffing out the path and the area that we were, actually going to be heading out on. And at the time, the handlers themselves were really nervous, of course, and the dog was just doing his job. And at one time, even a handler didn't even pay attention when the dog stopped, and it was awful. He pushed the dog right into the right into the booby trap, and that was a real sad experience.
I can imagine.
And so we just got hurt by that really bad, and the handler himself got some shrapnel from the trap itself. It was a grenade that blew up, and he got pieces up in his upper part of his body and whatnot. And but after that, we didn't see any more dogs. Sure, other units had them, but after that, our platoon never had one anymore after that, because that handler just was too badly hurt because he got pieces of shrapnel in the face and whatnot, and so that put him out of commission, and I'm pretty sure he went home with those wounds because
Wow.
he wasn't able to use one arm very well with the shrapnel that
Oh, really? Tore him up that bad?
Oh, yeah. Well, the grenade itself, when it blows up.
I mean, he had to be right on top of it to get,
Yeah.
the radius of a grenade is 35 meters.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So to
That's-
get the extent that he got, he had to be a lot closer.
Well, I was. Well, when I got hurt, out in the jungle, and like the last part of my duty was with the Minuteman platoon. And we were always on the go. We were always on the choppers. It seemed like we were more in the choppers in the air than we were on the ground. But our job was basically being taken out and thrown out of the choppers. And it would be usually in a platoon force or into a 2-squad force on 2 choppers. And we'd go out and get dropped. And we'd go into an area where maybe a company or a platoon or maybe even a squad that was just in a predicament where they were in an ambush and couldn't get out. They were totally surrounded, and we would have to just go in with 260s, 79 grenade launchers, and just get up as close as we could before they'd start firing on us and open up a path to try to extract, like I said, either whatever amount of men there was, because a squad would vary from 8 to 10 men, and then, of course, the platoon would be a little larger in force depending on how many men, they could have, because men were getting killed day in and day out.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the whole thing was, is that one day you'd have 8 men, the next day you'd be lucky to have 5.
It didn't sound like replacements came all that fast.
No, that was just it. There was so many people getting hurt and killed, and it was just rough all the way around. And then, when I was actually set down towards the end of my duty, before I ended up getting hurt, I was set down to track down a group of rocket and mortar team that were out just rocketing and mortaring our base camp. And that was Dong Tam, by the way. That was just outside of Saigon, about 4 miles. And that rocket team sent a rocket straight through the base into the barracks, that the men sometimes were in.
Okay.
And I lost 2 of my best buddies. They were in on sick call that night. But it turned out that they went ahead and put me on the chopper and says, we got to track these guys down and exterminate them, because they were really, causing a lot of damage, and a lot of lives got hurt in that base camp. And I was doing a pretty good job. They sent me down there, and I was trying to get right on their trail, which I did, because right off the bat, I found a grenade that was strapped to a piece of gut string, they called it in them days. It was just like a filament line, real, thin, that you could accidentally just trip it by touching it, and it would pull the pin from the grenade,
Right.
and that would blow up, of course. And so I actually blew 2 of those that morning. And then later on, I was just still on their path, and I was getting closer, and I jumped a ditch, because I was humping the 60. At that time, I finally became the 60 handler. I was the machine gunner for the platoon. And I jumped this ditch where my grenade man, my 79 grenade launcher man, couldn't jump for some reason. And he calls me back, and that's when I actually tripped the grenade myself. And I guess it was meant to be, because I had already passed it. And when I tripped it and I was getting right close to him, is when it blew. And I caught pieces in my head throughout the whole back of my body, and the back of this left leg. And, I was in pretty bad condition, but I might have been able to stay in country if I wouldn't have caught the next one later on that evening. Because out in the jungles, they would set different booby traps, of course. They would set some great big homemade jobs out of our own C4, mind you. Because a lot of guys would drop a lot of our own claymores in different stretches of jungle that we would have to travel in, and we'd run across a lot of water ditches where it was hard to go through and hard to stomp through all that mud, and some of the guys would lose their claymore, and of course with all eyes being on us all the time, during every minute of the day out there, it seemed like they always had somebody spying on you, and keeping an eye on everything you do. So they would see that claymore hit the ground, right into the mud, and the next guy would just go right over it like nothing. And so they'd pick it up and they'd use it to fix whatever they could to blow back at us. And this one that they set up for us when they were getting me out of there was like almost 2 feet in diameter. They didn't quite get a real good measurement on it, but they just guessed at it, and it was about 4 inches thick, and it had about close to 4 pounds of our own C4. And that was a real big explosion.
I can imagine.
That thing was set up on stilts. They said there was anywhere from 2 to 3 foot up. And when we were crossing this big ditch across a couple of tree trunks that were set up, and they were getting me out because I couldn't walk on because of my left leg, and they were helping me go across it. And before getting to the end, they blew it. And boy, was that an explosion. That thing just went off, and I mean, it did all of us a job.
Jeez, I bet it left one heck of a crater. We got to experiment with C4 when I was overseas.
It blew right at us, and I mean, it broke me all up. I got all broke up all over. A lot of pieces went in on this side, and messed up my arm, messed up my legs, messed up everything. And so, that was one of the major turning points in my whole life right there. I ended up, getting evac'd out, over to the MASH unit, and a lot of guys didn't make it. There was 3 guys that really didn't even make it to the choppers alive on that particular day. That was just one of the worst days of my life right there that turned my whole life around.
I imagine. So you never wound up really completing the full year tour?
No, I didn't. That was about my six month.
6 month in the country?
Towards the end of my 6th month, and I was, like I said, humping the M60 machine gun, and I guess I made the mistake myself of being point, and I was only point man with the machine gun because I wanted to be the first one to catch up to them and do what I had to do. And they sure tried to stop me, of course, because like I said, I blew 2 grenades that morning. That's when they told me themselves that I was on the right path, And then that 3rd one, I guess like some people say, was a charm, and that got me.
I don't know if that was much of a charm, but...
It stopped me in my tracks. I couldn't go anymore, and then the guy behind me, he had his leg up on top of the ditch that he couldn't jump, and he got a piece in it. Because as the grenades go off, they blow all sorts of BBs and pieces of the grenade itself, and it scatters and just all over, and in directions, And so he caught a piece, and I got some of it in the back of the head, like I said. But that great big one is the one that did all of us a job, and it hurt everybody that was, trying to get me out of there. And it was about half of the platoon. Half of the platoon was actually trying to get me and him out to the area that we could get picked up by the chopper. And when I was crossing that bridge, I looked off to the paddies, and I could see the choppers out there waiting on us. But they were getting fired on as it was, because those gooks were carrying their mortars, and their rockets, and whatever they had left, because they were really carrying a lot. I mean, because the mortar tubes themselves, and plus, you know, the mortars themselves that they would shoot up through those, and then the rockets themselves, they were still carrying, because you could tell, because the path itself, because we were trained to look at what the prints in the mud would look like,
Right.
you know, whether they were just on the go, on the run, and they were going light, or they were on the go and they were carrying heavy, and that meant that they were carrying a lot of weight, you know, as far as either rockets or different explosives, you know, and that was pretty rough. And I ended up going to a mass unit. Oh, by the way, I forgot about being a tunnel rat. By golly, I forgot about that portion of it. That was an experience in itself, believe me. When you're a tunnel rat and you're going down in a tunnel where you can't see at all, it's pitch black. And these are the guys that are coming up out of there, and you don't know where they're coming out at any given time, and they're coming up and they're with their AK-47s trying to take out as many of us as they can, you know. That was really something, and you didn't know where they were coming out of because you were just not seeing anything.
Right.
The jungle was just so thick, you know, it was just so heavily vegetated that, and I believe that's what they wanted to do when they went in with Agent Orange, is get rid of a lot of that foliage.
Oh, yeah. That's what I heard about that.
Yep. And that hurt a lot of the GIs, you know, that were out there, you know. A lot of us guys got hurt by that Agent Orange really bad later on when it started affecting some of them. In fact, there was some of the guys that were in a little heavier part of it, they were even getting big blotches on their legs already and whatnot from it that I had run into before this happened to me, before I ended up my time in country there.
Well, it sounds like you had a lot happen. Unfortunately, we are winding down.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I thank you for being on the show.
Okay, yeah.
And I have
anytime.
a chip for you.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much.
It's Channel 46, Semper Fi.
Right.
And
There
if
we
you
go.
ever like to be back on a second time to talk a little bit more extensively about your time as a tunnel rat, I'd be more than happy to have you on again.
That's an experience in itself.
So that kind of wraps it up for another show.
Okay.
Remember, you have a story. I want to hear it, and I want to share it with everyone else, just like he did today. So till next week, have a good time. Thanks for tuning in. Hoorah.
God bless.
All right. Thank you.